Klam. This is Conversations with Poets. We're back at Downtown Library Central, and we're in the Neil Morgan Auditorium, and I've got Natasha Hooper, co-host of the San Diego Poetry Slam, performance poet, slam champion with the team in 2018, right?
17.
17, right? Yeah. That must have been a wonderful experience. We'll get into that. I've been checking you out, watching your clips. Oh, man. Natasha Hooper. I found your Instagram, too.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Up at the top, like, you describe yourself as an artist.
Yeah.
And so, like, for people who might not make the connection between artist, writer, performer, what makes a performance poet, or what is the connection to as an artist?
I guess it's just, well, for me, just a different type of art. I feel like anybody that creates things or puts things together could be considered an artist. So for me, as a wordsmith, so to speak, a person who organizes words in a way and practices and, you know, hones my craft and gets on the stage and presents, I kind of view it as a form of art.
Of course.
Yeah.
Clearly, right? You know, I also looked at your Instagram, and you also describe yourself as Jim from The Office.
I feel like Jim is just the most relatable one for me personally.
Yeah, he's kind of a romantic, right?
Yeah, I love Jim. Jim and Pam's romance is like my favorite thing about The Office.
He's funny,
Yeah.
right? And
like deadpan funny.
Are you ready? Here's a Jim quote. You gotta tell me what this means. Bears eat beets. Beats, bears, Battlestar Galactica.
So that was an episode when he was talking to Dwight and he was trying to confuse him. They're always getting in these hijinks together. I don't remember exactly what happened in the episode, but I do remember that quote.
Yeah, and you're writing humor, right? A sense of humor. And I've been kind of paying attention to them for a very long time, all the way back to like 1998 when it was first established in San Diego, and then there was a little bit of a break, and then Rudy Francisco and everything that you guys did. And I personally, a poem that addresses real issues but also has a sense of humor speaks to me, and I remember those performances. For your writing, is having a good sense of humor and being like Jim important?
Yeah, so I had to kind of develop that over time because when I first started writing, I was just super serious, very like specific about writing about Black issues and things that are happening in society and things that we face. And I think I had to kind of not come out of that, but expand a little bit as far as writing more about personal things and writing about those same topics in a way that you can kind of flip things on its head a little bit. I don't have a lot of humorous poems, but I do have one that's a little bit satirical. I called it #BaywatchBetty. Maybe I can do it later, but I don't incorporate a lot of humor. I think it's very admirable when people can do that, especially with writing, because it's something you have to like put down on paper and then rehearse and memorize and like regurgitate to the audience, and you don't know if they're going to laugh. So to be able to do that successfully is something that I'm working up towards.
How did you get there in the beginning? How did you realize, hey, I want to do this. I'm going to stand in front of an audience, or at the very least, I want to put words down on a page?
So I think my original inspiration actually came from my older brother. So we grew up in a very like conservative Christian household, but my brother, as he progressed through high school, he decided to start rapping. So he raps now. He actually does like battle raps. He's very good. So he started doing Christian rap, and at the time, very supportive of my brother. This is when we still had CDs. So I was taking like his mixtapes to school and like handing them out. And then I was like, maybe I want to be a rapper too. So I had my own like little notebook that I would write rhymes in. I quickly realized that was not my calling.
Not a rapper?
Yeah, no. But those turned into some of the poems that I started with early on. And then having opportunities to do like talent shows at school is kind of my first entry point to actually getting on the stage and like sharing, and then getting feedback from that was like kind of lit the fire inside me. I was like, wow, I might actually be good at this.
Yeah, it feels good, right?
Yeah.
And a good applause.
Yeah.
Did you right away write true to your experience, what you were seeing, what you were feeling, or did you write to entertain? Did you have a kind of purpose?
Right, I think right away I was just writing about like society is messed up.
Yeah.
Like right away. And then I had to like dial it back. Not dial it back, I won't say that, because I don't really believe in doing that, but just diversify it a little bit over time.
Yeah, and the slam stage is a great place to speak your mind,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and I think way back in the beginning, Mark Smith from the Green Mill, the guy who started it all, his message was that the points were not the point, right?
Yeah.
It was about organizing your thoughts, fine-tuning your craft,
Yeah.
and speaking to an audience about your perspective and what you see.
Yeah, an experience.
Yeah, yeah. So for people who aren't sure how Poetry Slam works, I guess this is kind of a two-part question. How does it work? Judges, right? And the scoring scale. And then if people want to get involved, can they just come and sit in the audience and become a judge and that kind of thing? How does it work?
So basically, a poetry slam is a competition. Well, you'll have a group of poets who will sign up, and each poet will have 3 minutes with a 10-second grace period to recite an original poem. No props, just poetry. And then we actually pick judges at the moment of the slam. During the slam, we pick 5 random judges from the audience. So that's kind of one of the fun things about slam, is that you can get that chance to be involved. We just literally pick randomly who wants to judge, and we go hand you scorecards. Then the judges will score on a scale of 0 to 10 using decimal points. So 6.7, 7.8, 8.2. Then we take the 3 middle scores. So we drop the lowest score, we drop the highest score. We take the 3 middle scores, add them up, and then that's the score for the poet.
And you go to decimal points to avoid ties,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Sorry. Now, what about if someone comes who's with a poet and they become a judge and throw 10s every time?
See, I always give that disclaimer too. You cannot know the poet, so if you want to be a judge, you cannot like be a family member of the poet or a close friend or know them very well. To make it fair, of course, we don't want the bias, because you can't just throw up 10s for your buddy and then they end up winning the slam. So.
If my mom came, I would get 10s all night long.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would hope so.
I could do 15 poems. I got, what was that, 150?
30s across the board.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So you've performed and done very well, yeah? And you had that experience in 2017 of going all the way to nationals.
Yeah.
And then winning nationals. And, you know, for me and everybody in the poetry community, you represented San Diego,
Yeah, I did.
How was that experience?
I loved it. The team that year, I feel like we had Rudy, Javon, myself, Chrissy Croft, and Viet. And with me and Chrissy being on the team, we were both fairly new to slam and making the team. And that was the first time that I had actually made the poetry slam team. So I was stoked to be working with them. And I think some of my favorite poems that I've performed were some of the group pieces that came out of that team. Just being able to be in community with them and study other poets, do exercises, and really be pushed to write and push myself to write about things that I normally maybe wouldn't write about. I think that's one of the most beneficial things for me of being on a poetry slam team, is kind of the accountability and the challenge that it gives you to just become a better writer.
In this poem, Black people will be replaced by the word America. America has a deep history, can trace its roots before colonial expansion, you know, refuses to be reduced to the slave trade, America never needed a declaration of independence to know that all are created equal. America knows that Lincoln did not free the slaves, knows in fact America did. America remembers the Middle Passage, the construction of Black Wall Street, the shooting of Martin and Malcolm X, knows the shooter.
And of course, being able to study under Rudy Francisco and Javon Johnson, like, those are like two of the best poets that I know. So it was
The group pieces were co-written?
Yeah, so basically the way we would do group pieces is we would kind of collectively come up with ideas. So either a person would already have an idea and they would present it to the group, or we would kind of brainstorm an idea. But sometimes, for the most part, it would be one person to say, hey, I want to do this idea. So we would pick people, like who's interested in this idea to write on, and then you write your own piece, and then we kind of put it all in a document, edit it down, and then that's how it becomes a group piece. And then from there, we figure out which lines, which people are going to say. Are we going to add any choreography? Are we going to do some in unison? It's really a cool process.
Yeah, and it sounds good. It
Yeah.
looks good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be part of that team, Rudy Francisco, right? So a mentor, huh? And he guided you, or was it more of a mutual? We're all very good at this. Let's
No.
go for it. Kind of thing? No, it was not.
Absolutely not. I
Don't
think
do
I actually never competed in a poetry slam until 2015. So I was very new. My first time going to a national event was Women of the World in 2016, and I was like, oh wow, like this is big. Like people, it kind of just inspired me to want to get better and want to improve on my own performance. But yeah, studying under Rudy, I definitely just took direction from him. It was not mutual at all. I didn't have anything to give in the way of teaching or offering any kind of mentorship.
I was about 18 when I started driving. I was about 18 the first time I was pulled over. The officer spilled his lights all over my rearview mirror. He splashed out of his car with his hand already on his weapon. He looked at me the same way a tsunami looks at a beach house, and I could tell that he's the kind of man who brings a gun to a food fight. He called me son, and I thought to myself, that's an interesting way of pronouncing boy.
Yeah, he must have seen a lot in you, and you as a mentor must have gone, all right, take me there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, but you also participated in the writing and
Yeah.
making decisions about your piece.
Yeah.
Now, what about hosting now? Do you is this kind of a way of giving back? Like, do you host Poetry Slam because you're just, you're part of this community and it's a natural
Yeah.
progression?
I love poetry slams, but I found over time that they give me terrible anxiety. So I don't like competing in poetry slams, but I love being around poetry slams. I love the art, the competition, the way that people tend to bring their best to a poetry slam. So being able to facilitate that space for me is kind of where I can be adjacent to the competition of poetry slams versus actually being involved in them, because whew,
Yeah.
it's very taxing, having to worry about scores and which poems to do after which people. It's very technical when it's kind of like a sport if you want to think about it that way. Worrying about time, you have to practice to make sure you're not going over time because you'll get time penalties if you do, and just different subject matter, placing that behind certain poems. It's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, so to speak. I just host. That's all I do
Yeah,
now.
that's where you're at. So how did you handle the jitters then? Because it sounds like it was,
Lots of breathing
tough to get-
exercises.
breathing exercises.
That's
right?
all I could do,
Telling
because
you.
it's kind of like,
Meditation.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Meditation, crystals, breathing, just trying to calm myself down. That's also a thing with working with a team. It takes some of that anxiety off because you have people to lean on
Yeah.
who are actually up there on stage with you, whereas when you're just by yourself, it's just you.
I listen to you, I watch your clips, and I see someone who's totally confident. It's interesting to know that you had these moments before you got up on stage.
Yeah.
Does that change once you get into the flow of your work? Do you
I
have that
think
sort of
once I get on stage, yes. But the moment, like that moment right before I get on stage where there's just so much uncertainty, I'm like, am I making the right decision? Like, I'm hoping I won't forget my poem. That's a thing. Like, what if I just completely blank? Like, what if I go over time? There's just too many things to worry about. I just want to
variables,
do the
right?
words.
What is the penalty if you go 3 minutes and 11 seconds?
I think it's a 0.5 deduction for every 10 seconds over.
Which can be significant.
Yeah.
Because I would say most slams, it's very close at the end.
Exactly.
Especially if they're grand slams.
I've lost a slam that way.
At the very end.
Yes.
Oh, no.
I have. I actually lost, well, I won't say I lost that way, but I whips. So the individual World Poetry Slam, where I placed second, I actually had a time penalty in this second round. I don't think it really mattered at the end, but I almost didn't make final stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a big thing.
Now the time, a lot of the poems, especially in 2017, were they right up to 3:10? Or like, did you guys give a little 3 seconds or 5 seconds? Let's go to 3:05. Was it that meticulous?
So when we time our poems, I think I remember Rudy saying try to get your poem to about 2 minutes and 45 seconds. And that is because you'll have audience reaction. You may perform the poem a little bit differently. Your cadence may be different once you actually get on stage. So you don't want to, memorize a poem exactly for 3 minutes or exactly for 3 minutes and a couple seconds, because that's how you'll get a time penalty. So like usually we try to go under 3 minutes to allot for those moments where maybe you'll have to be silent or wait for people to stop clapping, especially if you're in a room this size and everyone's clapping. You're one person, it's going to be hard to try to talk over them, so you might have to pause, wait a little bit, and then resume the poem.
Yeah, there are a lot of factors, huh?
Yeah.
So if the audience is kind of wild and lively, you might have a lot of breaks and pauses where
Yeah.
they're not going to hear you because they're, reacting to the
Exactly.
work, right? And a keen sense of time too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Will you perform a poem or read a poem?
Yeah, I can perform a poem.
All right.
So I will do. So this is a poem where, when it was I still on the slam team? I can't remember. I wrote this poem some years ago, but it was around the time where I was being pushed to write more about myself and more personal things, and it's actually one of my favorite poems that I've written, just because it took me the longest out of all of my poems to write, and I felt like it's probably the most vulnerable, or the best show of not only myself but of my writing and my work, so to speak. So now this isn't going to be like how I would do it at the Poetry Slam,
Right, yeah.
but I'll just perform it.
Can't wait.
After another breakup, for one reason or another, my ex-partner wonders why I was not afraid to lose her. Questions if there was ever any love between us, and why should this be so easy for me. And I want to tell her that losing can be a love language too.
If you have done it enough times, that I do not fear losing, for I have already lost many a thing, a sanity, a faith, a mother. I have lost a mother, and am told to be grateful that at least she can be replaced. Grateful that the cancer didn't return to claim me too, that instead it gave me losing as my first love language, a tongue to speak in before I knew words, and a dying woman as my first home, the one who sacrificed herself for my sister and me, 2 children brought into the world on a Friday, a mother turned into a metaphor on a Friday, a birth and a goodbye, and a revolving door, and a heartbreak I'm sure I felt but am yet too young to remember, all on the same day, but not nearly the same week. Every Friday since has been either a celebrating or a slowly slipping away. So you must know that if I lose you, it will only translate into a story of how I can grow out of grief in a week's time. From Friday to Friday, from birth to funeral and back again in only 7 days, lost as a synonym for savior. So you know a week's time will give me 3 days to resurrect and 4 more to walk away from the empty womb. You'll return to the carcass and find that there is no life, only a revolving door, only the faintest whisper of loss, and a child who cries but does not know how to fill the void, who speaks to her mother in the afterlife, an ancient scroll relationship written in script I never had the chance to learn. And is this not what love is? My mother tongue, my birthright and lessons of losing, me knowing that when you leave, I should be grateful that at least you can be replaced. Grateful that at least I had a choice this time, will not shed any tears, instead will save them all for the metaphor, will remind myself again to stop making homes out of people because the result is always cancerous. And here I go, mastering all the lessons I've learned, losing myself and calling it love, losing her again and calling it love, not having her to begin with and calling it love, trying to convince myself that I do not fear losing, for I have already lost many a thing. I tell my partner, I'm still learning to be fluent in a language that does not feel like the absence of my mother. To hold another woman's heart whole in this new and trembling vocabulary, I'm still learning.
To speak in a love that sounds more like birth than goodbye. Thank you.
Loss is a synonym for savior.
Yeah.
This is a beautiful poem. Difficult
Thank
to
you.
write?
Yeah, I feel like I included so many things, themes in the poem, and I didn't want them to get lost amongst each other. And I think that's one of the reasons it took me so long, because not just the writing, but the editing and taking things out that didn't feed the goal of what I was trying to say. Because we have religious themes, we have themes of time, we have obviously themes of loss. You know, there's just so many things wrapped up in there.
Yeah.
So
how did your lover respond?
that didn't happen. It was all in my head.
Yeah.
I think I've had situations where I am told that I'm like I have been told in the past, like I'm callous or seem uncaring, and that's kind of what that was born out of, like, maybe I'm this way because I already, it's like you've already lost your parent, like to lose some person I just met a couple years ago, as messed up as that sounds, it's like you can't get worse than losing your mom.
Right. I think there's a depth of caring and presenting the poem. Because as I was listening to the poem, I was thinking about an audience listening to this poem, and there are people, and especially in a bigger theater, 300 strong, there are a lot of people in that room feeling a lot of what you have felt over those experiences in your life.
That's definitely
sense
a
of
poem.
loss,
Yeah.
and then trying to find a way, trying to find that uplifting moment or thing, right?
Trying to relearn
how to live,
Yeah, I've definitely cried performing that poem a couple times.
What happens then? So you're performing.
I just gotta fight through it.
You gotta fight through it,
Excuse
yeah.
me.
And then the audience is probably like, that's probably even endearing almost, you know?
Yeah.
It's such an impactful moment for you to share it.
Yeah.
Right?
It was hard. Well, the times that's happened, it's hard because like you really do. Sometimes you just step back into the moment of how you felt when you were writing it, and so you really do like feel those same emotions. So it's hard to like push through that to be able to finish. That's also a hard thing about slam, because you have a time limit, so you don't have that natural space to be like, okay, give me a second, y'all.
Right.
You just
Right.
you just got to keep going.
Yeah. Not just memory in the sense of memorizing a poem, but memory in the sense of you are saying things that might make you cry.
Yeah.
Might stop you, might stop the moment, stop the audience.
Yeah.
You know, it's got to be one of those things though where, you know, everybody's with you. Have you ever been performing and the room is quiet? And they're not quiet because they're not paying attention. They're quiet because they're totally with you. Have you had that sensation?
I have. I feel like sometimes though that makes me more nervous.
Does it?
So I'm like, what are they thinking?
Yeah. But I mean, that's probably also got to be, and then it turns, right? It turns, especially at a slam, where the audience participation is going to help those judges bump those scores, right? So if the audience feels something, the judges, and they react to it, right? The judges are going to pull their scores up, and they're feeling, listening to you, hearing you, experiencing you, and then reacting to it in the end, you know? Yeah. Have you ever had a moment where it was so heavy and you cried and then one of the judges threw a 3.8 or something like that?
Oh my goodness. I think I would quit.
Yeah, right. And for people who, because you hear this sometimes about slam, that a competition or points for something so meaningful, something so deep, something beautiful that comes from your soul, right? How could you score it?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say to people who have wonder about that?
I don't know. I haven't thought about that. I haven't thought about that in depth. It is kind of, I think it's not just, I think when you enter a poetry slam or when you're preparing to compete in a poetry slam, you have to understand that it's not just about the content. It's also about creativity. It's about performance. It's about delivery. So there's other things that are being scored that aren't necessarily the content. I would hope that a poem like that wouldn't get scored at 3.8, but you know, it could be poorly written. You could just be like, my mom died and I'm bad at relationships. It's like, well, like the content is there, but like that wasn't, you know, could have been better.
Yeah, it's a competition. It's a sport,
it's a competition.
Yeah. So your mom's in your poems, your relationships are in your poems, so they're part of your trajectory as an artist, right? And as far as the content goes. Now, what about mentors in the sense of poets who you admire or any performers who you would ever emulate or say, I wish I had written that or I wish I had done that?
I feel like there are so many. I feel like I have a lot of poetry friends. I can name a few. Obviously, Rudy Francisco, Ebony Stewart, Black Chakra, Patrick Roche, Ephraim Nehemiah. I don't even want to finish this list because I know I'm going to leave people out. But yeah, there's been a few times where I'm like, that was genius.
Yeah.
I wish I would have, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you brought a poem today by Karim?
Karim, yes.
Karim, yeah. Would you read that poem?
Yeah, I'll read it. So Karim, I first met or saw Karim perform when I was in the beginning of my journey as a poet. This is when I was still in college, so I still hadn't performed in any poetry slams. But when I saw him perform, he just has so much energy, and just like what he was saying, and the way it was written. I'm only going to do the first half of the poem. So, assuming this poem is about a breakup. It's called Feels Funny. Us ending feels funny, like a joke that ain't worth laughing at, or something breathtaking that just ain't worth gasping at.
Feels like lungs teasing each other across a cigarette-stained sternum, almost like the devil being burned, and maybe funny ain't the word. Feels ironic in the moment. Wrong when it's holding my mind and it won't leave, like a stray dog in my front yard. Foam leaks from his teeth like a white hood in his Memphis mouth. Feels like the South in the 60s. Like almost being free. Like being confined comfortably. The contradiction of the things I can see and cannot be, the things I be and cannot leave, feel similar to a gram of weed. Some wishes and swisher sweets feel so much it leaves no room for me to feel anything. Can't breathe or not feel like I'm panicking. I have never been claustrophobic. I've always had bad posture and known it, but lately my back feels like it's being squeezed. Like I'm in a closet with an army of knees and the pressure is piling like leaves and I'm trying not to fall or be the ball. Dropping it all feels filthy when you're in love with what is outside the bounds of God. Yes,
Obviously, apparently, it is extremely, if not deathly hard, when differences come together like Jesus and a law feels like frustration. And then he goes into the rest of the poem. But you just have to see him perform it. Look it up on YouTube. Feels Funny, Karim, Korim.
Karim, yeah.
Yeah.
Honesty, you know, really, you know, there's no make-believe in that, it
Yeah.
seems to me.
Yeah.
He's talking about his life.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, and I think that's probably the way to go if you're a young writer and
Absolutely.
you want to, because I think nowadays the audiences are probably getting a lot more sophisticated. And they can probably tell a pretender like right away. Have you had
Yeah.
those experiences too, where people come and it's just like, wow, needs work?
In a good way or a bad way? Yeah. We've had some times where we're just kind of like, okay, that was interesting. Yeah.
Do you guys, as an organization, San Diego Poetry Slam, do you mentor? Because you do, if you take it outside the city, right? You guys, I remember Slam always having a coach or two coaches, right? Do you guys do any mentoring yourselves?
Me personally, no, only because I don't really have the bandwidth for it. But I do think that we want to start maybe doing some workshops or something for people who are interested, just to keep kind of the spirit and the quality, so to speak, of writing and poetry slams alive, because it's kind of directionless right now, just given things that have happened in the poetry community and just COVID, the pandemic, just everything being spread out, not having certain festivals to be at, not having really that culture of creating a team and building up that team and practicing and perfecting. So I think that's something that we do have a goal to do, is maybe start doing some workshops.
This would be great.
Yeah.
This would be great. And so for the direction right now and what's upcoming is that there will be slams at Queen Bee, right?
Queen Bees.
And you're hosting. Rudy will be there walking around taking pictures, right? And promoting, yeah?
Yeah.
And so people can expect a series of slams that lead up to a grand slam.
Yes.
And that night is probably stacked. There are probably 1 million people there, right?
Every night, honestly.
Yeah.
So Queen Bees is located in North Park. I'm not sure how many it holds. I want to say between 150 to 200. I'm not sure. But the line goes around the building.
Yeah.
So it's every month. We have on the second Monday of each month the slam. And then in March, we will have our grand slam. So basically, if you've placed first or second in any of those preliminary slams, you'll be able to compete in the grand slam for money. And I think it's, I want to say $500 just for doing
Nice.
poetry.
There you go.
So
I like money.
yeah, exactly. And that's what the entry fee goes towards, basically, is being able to support the arts and give back a little bit. And also, when we do have teams, that we take care of the team. We don't want people worried about, how they're going to get there or where they're going to stay or what they're going to eat. So yeah, that goes to supporting the team as well.
That's the way to do it, because you want to get to the city and everybody's struggling.
Just focus on the poetry.
Yeah, right. Set everybody up, keep everybody close too is probably a good
Yeah.
idea. Yeah. So you guys are stacked. What's the entry fee?
It's $10.
$10 to come in.
Only $10.
Only $10,
That's it.
right? Yeah, and it's so popular because it's just a spectacle.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Yeah, and it's very interactive,
Yeah.
right? Well, I wanted to thank you for coming and talking
Yeah,
about slam,
absolutely.
talking about yourself and your own writing and your
Yeah.
trajectory as a writer. Thank you so much, Natasha Hooper.
Thank you,
And I
Michael.
want everybody to come out and check out the Poetry
Yeah,
Slam.
if you haven't been to the
San-
Poetry Slam, you have to go to at least one.
At least, right?
Yeah, at least one.
Yeah, get there early though.
Yeah, get there
Yeah.
early
Yeah.
if you want a good seat.
You gotta camp out, and then for the Grand Slam, you gotta bring a tent, camp out front.
Oh man,
Yeah.
can you imagine?